Being an educator is one heck of a lonely journey, but every step holds a story, an experience that shapes how we teach, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Educator Experience. I'm your host, Sally Carter, and together we'll explore the moments that define us as educators. Through authentic conversations and shared experiences, we're building a community that connects, reflects, and inspires, all while breaking down barriers in education, one story at a time. You are not alone. Let's grow together. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Educator Experience podcast. My name is Sally Carter, and I am the host of this whole shindig. Even though we've wrapped up our new episodes for 2025, we've got something special lined up for the next few weeks for you. It's our best of series, starting right here with season 1. Now, we had 5 fabulous guests for our very first season of the Educator Experience, and I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of them for saying yes to something brand new and trusting the process. Now, if you were to ask me which one of our episodes was actually my favorite, and absolutely nobody has asked me, but I want to bring it up anyways, I'd have to say all of our season 1 guests, including Roberta Sawatsky and Joey Brown. And there is a reason for this. I actually started this podcast a full year before June 2025, so before season 1 launched. But life and business changes forced me to hit pause, reevaluate. And then once I restarted the project, those early guests came back to re-record with me with complete trust in me and what we were building together. And honestly, that will always mean the world to me. At the end of the day, my favorite podcasts are simply the people who put up with my shit the most, and they came back, so I'm extremely grateful. And I cannot forget Joey Brown because let's just say we ran into more tech issues than I can count, but he was an absolute legend to work with through every glitch. So literally, people who put up with me, those are my favorites. But a lot has evolved since season 1. And we will keep evolving as we grow. But really, what's never changed is our foundation. We are all about community, connection, support, and celebrating educator voices. So, what's next? In the new year, we've launched our very first e-course accreditation series, an AI Fundamentals for Educators series, which is a next step in expanding how we support educators through practical tools, community, and connection. We're also introducing monthly community discussions on higher ed topics like the future of education and the impact of AI in the classroom. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. It is really the easiest way to stay up to date, grab exclusive discounts, and receive VIP invites. Also, I'm really excited to mention that we have a reflective journal for educators being released in the next few weeks, as well as some mugs that are the most colorful things that you will ever put on your desk. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So here it is, a little best of season 1. We are kicking things off with my friend, Joanne Buffalo. She shares powerful insights on how educators can build relationships with Indigenous liaisons and support workers in their schools and institutions. She talks about why every child matters and how our responsibility as educators, especially while working on Indigenous land, is to reach out, ask for guidance, and build meaningful relationships that support our Indigenous students. Now let's get to it.
They jump leaps and bounds in the education field, School District 73. So they pretty much have their organization well put together and thought of everything that needs to be thought of, and they act on it right away. That's the thing I see with them. They act on it right away. It's not just all paperwork.
What is the work that they do directly with educators, or what do you want educators to know?
There's actually a booklet on truth and reconciliation that you can get from the website, get it sent to your schools, to have more knowledge in the sense of children that you're working with, you know, um, not saying your job will be easier, but at least you'd have those tools that you need should you come across anything that you need answers for. I know they have education assistant workers and cultural workers. Some schools have elders that come in. So if you have questions, do not be afraid to go have a coffee or tea with them. That's the best way to gain some knowledge. The other way is if it's personal knowledge that you're seeking culturally or spiritually, then you just offer protocol in the form of tobacco and say, could I, have some discussions with you, of a family nature or whichever. There's certain protocols that you follow through. But if they're hired on, part of your staff there, then I think you could approach them, and just say, can we book a time, to have a discussion? Say if it's with the student or the family or to have a sit down and have a circle talks. Sometimes those are better ways to, instead of saying, oh, that child's got to stay in detention, or that child's suspended. Because when you involve family, because sometimes the parents or whoever's looking after that child, the caregivers, don't even know what's going on sometimes. So you have to enlighten everyone to say, let's figure this out.
I like that. Let's
Because,
figure it out.
yes, the old saying of it does take a community to raise a child. In this day and age, with a lot of the substance abuse and the addictions out there, it's really easy to lose our young ones to those sources.
Mhm. And I
Mm.
think just even bringing it back to adult education, the same ideas and same thought processes apply, right? To be able to care, to communicate, to better understand culture and appreciate. At least in the post-secondary institutions that I've worked for, we do have a lot of access to Indigenous resources and support, which is amazing. But sometimes we don't know the questions to ask. And not everyone in their organizations has those opportunities as well or those resources. So I think what you brought up, what offering tobacco and seeking out some sort
Mhm.
of um, communication or kinship and being curious, right? The idea of being curious.
So if you don't have access to those certain people in your schools, look to your school district
Okay.
because they do have a wealth of knowledge there and they can either at least point you in the right direction or have someone come join as a visitor to help with the cultural part of it. So that's part of what we're there for because they put full engagement. They take their as say work. I mean, it is work, but they take their livelihood very serious in representing for our children. And so they're always transpiring something into positive in saying that it's, cliche, but it's every child matters.
In this next clip, Dr. Treena Orchard challenges what she calls the normal way of doing university and invites us to rethink how EDI shows up in our academic spaces. She shares a powerful framework for considering how to do EDI in our own house, meaning the specific faculty or department we work in, the resources we already have, and what's missing from the wider landscape.
Looking at ways of not just talking about it, but making it part of our curriculum, making it part of our normal way of doing things so that it's not seen as, oh, just an add on. Oh, we have to remember equity. Oh, it should be part of just the normal way, the new normal of doing university in terms of policy, teaching, different considerations for different student populations, and that kind of thing.
So, what are some actual succinct strategies that perhaps new educators could introduce into their classrooms or to their practice?
Well, I think some of the things that new educators could do before even getting to the classroom is to have these discussions about, so how do we do EDI in our house? Because it's not across the board the same. The way the hard sciences approach it, probably a little bit different than those of us in the social sciences or even the health sciences. So I think it's sort of getting a read of the room by, faculty and department and school, wherever you happen to be located, and get a sense of what is the culture here? How are my colleagues responding to this? What kinds of resources do we have at our disposal to make it so that we don't have to recreate the wheel every time we want to try and do something? So having a sense of how things have been done in your local space, also being aware of the different resources. There's a lot of resources online. It can be kind of overwhelming, but most universities and schools have someone, whether it's teaching and learning center, who are probably pretty well adept at accessing some of the resources that have come across their desk as being particularly helpful and useful. So those are some preliminary things. And then it's also a reflection of, what kind of scholar are you? What kind of teacher are you? What kind of gaps do you might want to address in your teaching? Not just in terms of content, but also how you do it. Do you provide choice in your assignments? Do you have a combination of written as well as multiple choice? The sort of things we're required to do often in larger classes. But also, do you include in your resource list academics and other writers who are not white men? That's another very important way of doing good equity, diversity, and inclusion work.
What I'm hearing from you as well, or what's coming up for me, is it's an opportunity for us to get to know our students or our learners as well, their backgrounds, and potentially incorporate aspects of various cultures, but really actually trying to connect and get to know people who are sitting in front of us or sitting among us, kind of thing.
Yeah, our students are really diverse. London, when I moved here, people were like, "Oh, it's Pleasantville. It's a really white city." And, well, it really wasn't even when I moved here. I mean, it's become much more diverse, but our students have always been very, very diverse and mixed. And it's incumbent upon us to incorporate principles and ideas and discussions that are inclusive.
In this next segment, Chantale Hutchinson dives into the important work of uncovering our own unconscious biases as educators. She walks us through key questions we can ask ourselves to better understand how our assumptions shape our teaching and interactions with students. It's an ongoing practice that strengthens our empathy, our awareness, and ultimately our impact in the classroom. Let's get to it. As we start to wind down the conversation, I was hoping to ask you, what are some questions? Because it sounds like in order to test or question our own unconscious biases, what questions can we ask ourselves?
Well, it brings me to Stephen Brookfield's work, and I quite like him. He's an adult educator researcher.
Got a bookcase full of his books. He's awesome.
Do
Love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's kind of the adult ed rock star a little bit, right? Yeah. I think he actually is in a band, maybe I heard. Anyways, but so I find what he has to say, it really resonated. And when he talks about critical reflection and he talks about the four lenses that you can place on that reflection. So the first one is your autobiographical lens. So really that's the way that we see the world. And that is where we go to, right? So I'm looking, and in my situation, I was looking at this situation and I was making these assumptions based on whatever that may be. I don't really know what I was founding those assumptions on because they were not correct, but I was. And so I was looking at the world through my lens and through my experiences. And that is fine. But what he proposes is to also look at that experience or that incident or your practice through your student's lens as well. So what is, in this circumstance, what was the student experiencing, or how are they seeing the way that I was behaving or the way I was teaching or the approaches that I was using in the class? And then my colleagues' lens. So how would my colleagues perceive this situation? And then the theoretical lens. So looking at the literature, grounding your practice in the literature, is that in alignment with your perceptions, your students' perceptions, your colleagues' perceptions, right? So that you're informing your practice through these different facets that really ideally would create a more holistic approach and a more considered approach. And so when you are finding that you're butting up against something, or maybe, like I was saying, something just was not sitting right with me in those moments, can you put these lenses onto your practice and use them to help you reflect on what you're doing and maybe further guide you or initiate those conversations with students to get their perceptions, with your colleagues to get their perceptions, or go and be guided by the literature and see what it's saying. Is it consistent with your practice?
Chantal, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insight around unconscious bias and how it's an important conversation that I think we each as educators need to be continually having with ourselves and reflecting upon.
I think that reflection piece is really key. I think that that's something that we talk a lot, when we're talking particularly to new faculty, like what is your philosophy? Like what kind of grounds your work? And then how do you reflect on those experiences?
If you folks don't know, I like to rock the sweatshirts of various institutions. I have a ton of them, and my sole goal and purpose on this planet is to accumulate as many as possible. So if you are out there thinking, you know what Sally needs is another cool sweatshirt to rock because we're just seeing the same ones on repeat, send. I love it. This one is Northern Lights College, a place that I work in Northern British Columbia, and it is amazing. In this next clip, my buddy Steve Newton talks about how AI, online resources, and virtual reality are helping learners retain information at dramatically higher rates. We even get into a fun side conversation about choose your own adventure books and how today's gamified learning experiences tap into the same sense of exploration and engagement. Steve highlights why fun isn't a bonus in education, but a critical part of how we learn. We also dig into the rapid evolution of AI and what it means for the future of teaching and student success. Just the idea of gamification in general. And I did some research and looked up a recent study by the University of Colorado. It found that students who learned through gamification showed an 11% increase in factual knowledge and a 9% increase in retention rate compared to those who didn't. But I would actually venture to suggest that it would be higher, even higher, because you're using all parts of learning and the brain while involved in a game and working through it. It's just fascinating the things coming out with technology.
Yeah, so I've also read some similar stuff as well, and I would agree with you that the retention rate, particularly in adult learners, is quite a bit higher. And now
Mhm.
here's the cool thing about some of these technologies. The way the brain makes sense is through combinations of existing connections of synapses, so it's got the memories and all that sort of good stuff in there. And then something new that it sees that it compares against that, is it a threat or not? Yes, no. If no, then what does this mean? If yes, what do I do kind of stuff? So a bunch of the VR technology now is starting to evolve where you can have different scents. So for example, there's VR goggles that you can get that would introduce a scent of, I don't know, burning gasoline if there was a highway tanker overspilled and you had a simulation of this tanker truck on fire that is hauling gasoline. So training in a VR environment for firefighters responding to a hazardous material spill with burning gasoline gives them that extra sense. So it just enhances all of their learning and their retention and their sense making even more. So
Yeah.
that
You know
stuff's evolving too.
You know what it comes to my mind, and you might laugh at this, but did you ever read those choose your own adventure books? This was decades ago. I feel like I'm mentally making a comparison to those type of books that I loved reading when I was a kid to where we're at now with gamification and adult learning. It's incredible what we can do. In some of the post-secondary institutions that I teach with, they include gamification as part of certain courses where it allows students the opportunity, for example, to be part of a marketing team developing a new product. What would you do if? And it gives them different options. And then it's like a competition kind of thing, but it's all based on what their team decides. And the result is that the students are actively engaged and they're having fun, right? And as you said, fun is so important, particularly as a learner when you're already stressed.
So in my world, I follow all the AI evolution as well, right? And what's going on. And one of the sectors that has really embraced it, apart from a whole bunch of the obvious ones, has been the online marketing world. And that's uber competitive. So they're always looking for a way to distinguish themselves from anything else. It used to be, pain point solution, buy. Simple stuff. Well, there's some really, really good indications right now that the gamification side of that has helped enhance sales rates for a bunch of different online products. So if you think about it, you're starting to see more and more of these, what you might think is silly little badges. You can go into an online tool and you get badges the more engaged you are, right? Or there's a certain sound, ding, 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 once you hit a certain level. That wouldn't be in there 5 years ago even, right? So the gamification stuff is starting to come in a big way. And why I like following that particular sector is because they are always at the leading edge, because if they're not, they don't survive. They got to go get a job at Walmart or something like that, which is not what entrepreneurs are about. So gamification is absolutely a big thing. That's a functional learning, as well as a lot of the other psychological aspects, right?
And this is our final best of season 1 clip and the absolutely famous, infamous, all of the good things, Sarita Parmar. In this clip, Sarita reminds us that everyone has something to teach us, students, colleagues, and the people we meet along the way. She talks about the power of showing up authentically and how learners can always sense when you're being real versus when you're putting on a teaching persona. Her message is simple but powerful. Authenticity builds trust, and trust builds community.
Everyone has something to teach us, right? People are saying the right things, and on paper it sounds good, but yet there's this nagging feeling, and you're just like, I don't know if that works for me. And I'm learning to pay attention to that feeling. And so the so called professionals will tell you, right? This is the right way. This is the only way. And screw that. There isn't just one way to do things. Everyone you come into contact with, whether you're sitting in a classroom, as auditorium full filled with people listening to you, a friend, a neighbor, everyone knows something you don't know. And to think, hey, I'm the expert and I know better. No, you don't. So I think that's where the empathy piece comes in as well.
And so, how does your journey, so the various journeys that you've been on and your empathy aspect, how does that play
That's
into
a
the
good
workshops
question
that you
too.
offer?
I think the other thing is showing up authentically. Like growing up in the corporate world, that's another type of conditioning. You have to be professional and this is right, this isn't. And sometimes we put on a little bit of a mask. And people see through that. People see when you're being genuine and when you're not. And at the end of the day, whether again, I'm doing a business loan from back in my banking days and a client is opening up to me about their life and their business journey, they're not going to share things with me unless they like me, trust me, and respect me. And I think in order to earn that, and that's the thing, it has to be earned. You just have to show up real as you are. And not everybody will be your fit. You show up and you just be real. And some people are going to be your cup of tea and some aren't. But most people will respect the fact that you're showing up authentically. And they also respect the fact that this person is giving me space to share my feelings. I've had many people disagree with me. I've shared something in a workshop and somebody speaks up and they're like, hey, I have to push back on that. Hey, I have to disagree. And I'm like, bring it. Yeah, share. And just that
And that's
fact that I
okay.
think I
Exactly.
allow that space, lets people know, hey, it's okay. I'm here to learn and she's learning too.
You really hit on something here, that there is a shift in educators and professionals in general showing up authentically. That wasn't the way it was when I was in school. I didn't know anything about my professors or people I was in workshops with or my managers. They kept it all really like things to themselves. And I'm not advocating for sharing everything about one's life, but particularly when you're giving a workshop, there are certain things that can help us feel or open an idea of connecting with the audience that creates an opportunity for an even bigger impact. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Educator Experience. We hope you're walking away feeling connected, inspired, and just a little bit more supported on your journey. Ready to go a little bit deeper? Join the Educator Experiences community and check out our courses and workshops specifically designed to support new educators as they navigate the ups, downs, and everything in between. You'll find it all at educatorexperiences.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a fellow educator and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Together, we're building a vibrant community rooted in support and connection. See y'all next Monday.